So, imagine there are two restaurants, one that has many different menu items with a ton of different options, and the other with just a few to choose from. That is the best way to summarize the difference between Android and Apple, and based on your preferences, one is definitely better than the other. In today's video, we'll go over just that. This is my experience switching from Android to iOS. Let's talk about it. This video is going to be divided into 4 sections: device overview, objective pros and cons of each phone, general experience with the Switch, and personal verdict and recommendation. To start, device overview. Since 2019, I've been using the Samsung Galaxy Note 10 and now upgraded to the new Apple iPhone 15 Pro Max, which was a bit of a jump in multiple categories. We'll discuss that later. Overall though, both of which have not disappointed me, and I can't say that I'm either an Android or iOS guy. Rather, I like what works, specifically for my network. We'll discuss that later. The following are the raw stats of both devices. As you can see, the iPhone 15 is, of course, a pretty significant upgrade in regards to most qualities. But if we're comparing the more recent Android devices, the stats would be more neck and neck. So no need to be too concerned about that. Rather, regarding things you should take into consideration, let's move to the objective pros and cons. Firstly, Android gives users absolute control to a level that iOS cannot compete with. Although recently there have been some developments toward greater customization on iPhone, Android is just leagues more customizable with different launchers, themes, icons, etc. While on the flip side, because iPhones are fairly streamlined, they're generally more stable and have more seamless user interfaces, which can be a good thing for those who don't need to customize their devices. And on top of that, iPhones generally have better app optimization, specifically for things like social media. Apps like Snapchat or Instagram, ones that use your camera mostly, are just better on iPhone, with very little differences between past and new iPhones for the developers to consider with their apps. While for Android, there are many more things to consider when optimizing, so their performance can be a little spotty. But even then, there are so many Androids because there are so many options. If you want a cost-effective phone, you can get a cost-effective Android, but if you want a premium one, you may also get a premium Android. It's your choice. While for iPhone, there are only a few new ones to choose from. So objectively speaking, you can see that many of these pros and cons really do rely on personal preference, which is very true. However, each side does have its merits. Let's talk about my experience. To start, my first impressions going from Android to iPhone were pretty rocky. I'll admit, one thing to take note of is that in my experience, it's a little bit easier to go from iPhone to Android because of the same thing I mentioned earlier about the apps. There are just far less Apple apps that Android needs to be compatible with compared to the other way around. So because of that, when I moved to Android back in 2019, it was easy. But going back to Apple, my gosh, that was tough. To keep it simple, there were so many technical difficulties that I came across. Starting with the moved iOS app crashing for over a day, leaving me with no phone for a while, to my Samsung Notes having literally no way to convert back to Apple Notes, which was especially frustrating because most of those came from when I had an iPhone, and I was quite stumped in these matters. To give you an idea of how much effort it took to switch back my notes, here's a quick summary. First, I followed this gracious individual's code, linked down below, and used my Windows PC to open Samsung Notes, which natively doesn't work on anything but Galaxy Books. Then converted those to text files, transferred those to my Mac, then retyped the titles of every one of my 400 notes, and then used iCloud to send them back to my iPhone, which I then moved to its internal storage. And that took so long. And that was just one of, I think, 5 things I needed to convert. It was a doozy. So, was it worth it? Well, for me, honestly, partially yes, and partially no. Like I said, I'm neither an Android or iOS guy, and going between operating systems always means you'll gain some and then lose some. For example, I gained blue text messages, and oh my gosh, the number of people who commented on the green these past few years, ridiculous. While I lost the S Pen. Another one is I gained AirDrop between my other Apple devices, while I lost the back button. I gained much better app optimization, especially with the ones that I use. But I lost the camera that I started this channel with. So yeah, it's a win and lose situation. Not everything is going to be a zero-sum game, but you should focus on making it as positive sum as possible. And for me, even with everything said, yeah, there's been a lot of positive. Overall, the iPhone experience has been quite excellent. I've been able to FaceTime my family, airdrop pictures and videos we've taken together this little while, and use those little iMessage features when texting. It's those little things, but I truly believe that your environment shapes who you are. And as someone who associates with mostly Apple users at the moment, I feel more connected to them. While when I started university at an engineering school that I'm still attending, pharmacy though, I felt more connected to my classmates because I had an Android. They showed me little cool things they did with their phones, and I tried to emulate them. It was rad. And that's kinda how I see the debate these days. There's more to it. One big component is buying what makes you feel more connected with those around you, because these devices all have ecosystems that are very pervasive, so your environment does impact you. Let's move on to my verdict and recommendation. So acknowledging what I said about the objective pros and cons of these devices, let's see which one fits the bill. Again, this isn't an all-encompassing list, it's just what I feel most people value when comparing these devices. So let's go over them together, piece by piece. First, I mentioned customization. Now, if I were to go back and answer this as a freshman in college, I would full send Android. I wanted customization. But now, as a pharmacy student with way less time and creativity for those things, I don't really need that. When I was younger, I wanted to try it out, but I've never truly been someone who customizes things too much. I like to keep them stock. Perks of having more experience. So point goes to the iPhone. Next, stability. As someone who just wants something that works, yeah. This one honestly can go both ways for the most part. I think Android has become far more stable over the years. Even my Note 10 only has 2 glaring glitchy errors after its 4 years, which is leagues better than what I heard back then with bugs. So, point kinda goes to the iPhone, but again, they're both pretty stable. However, for app optimization, yeah, absolutely iPhone. And now, because we're comparing iPhones and Androids, we don't need to go over the options section. We're instead going to be replacing it with network. Now, this isn't necessarily about business or work or anything. I'm talking about my family, the people I care about, my relatives, my deep friends, my relationships, etc. Most of them use iPhones. But back when I got the Note, many of them had Androids. So you can kind of see that, yes, my own ecosystem is dictating my own tech ecosystem. And like I said, that's how I think much of the decision should really be made for you. First, look at what you need, and then what you value, and then what the people you care about use. If you want a phone for customization or programming or absolute freedom, the clear answer would be Android. But if you want one that's more streamlined, simplified, and easy to use, iPhone might be your best bet. But really, it always just depends firstly on your needs here. Focus on those, and I'm sure you'll turn out alright. Besides, it's not too big of a deal. iPhones, Androids, phones are just tools at the end of the day. The real people you should care about are the ones who stick with you no matter what phone you own. That's the lesson for today's video. So buy what you need, buy what you want, and worst comes to worst, you can always get another phone after your contract ends 3 years later. Stay disciplined. My name is Seeroost. It's spelled like Cyrus, but not like Sea Rooster. Just take out the terror. Thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful day. Peace.